everyone. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV. I'm Jim Cardle. The 2016 election is behind us, and here in Austin, the 2017 legislative session is set to begin on January 10th. State Representative Jason Isaac is from just south of Austin, House District 45. He was elected in 2010. He's a member of the Small Business Economic Development Committee and is vice chairman of the Texas Conservative Coalition. What might be coming down the pike during the 2017 legislative session? We're pleased to be able to visit today with State Representative Jason Isaac from House District 45. Well, Jason Isaac, thanks for coming in to join us today.
Thanks, Jim. It's great to be here.
You have been an elected official since the November 2010 election. You are coming back for another term this session, and people are focusing on the 2017 legislative session. I want to ask you particularly about a new initiative. That's the Texas Conservative Coalition's Pledge. Give us a background on an elevator speech level. What's the idea behind the Pledge? What are y'all trying to accomplish?
So the Pledge has actually been around for a few sessions. I remember in 2011, the Texas Conservative Coalition came into House District 45. We did a town hall in Dripping Springs, and that's where they first asked me to sign the Pledge. And if you will, it was similar to the Contract with America, but it's this 2000, and now it's the 2017 Pledge with Texans, where we're asking members of the Texas Conservative Coalition to sign the Pledge and then support legislation that advances our ideals and support and vote for legislation that aligns with our LIFT principles. And our LIFT principles are limited government, individual liberties, free enterprise, and traditional values. And so we've broken down the Pledge into kind of 6 areas where we want to focus, and then we'll ask members to file legislation that deals with those, and then try to get the coalition, the conservative caucus, if you will, behind these priorities and push our 2017 Pledge with Texans.
Okay, before we get into the details of the Pledge itself, talk a little bit, if you can, for those who don't know. Legislators have the ability to join the hunting caucus, the sportsman's caucus. Tell us exactly, what is the Texas Conservative Coalition?
So the Texas Conservative Coalition is a member-led caucus of our conservative members of the legislature.
Okay.
It was formed, gosh, I think in the early 2000s by a block of conservative members that wanted to get together and work with one another to build support to pass legislation and to kill bad legislation that we don't believe aligns with our LIFT principles.
Can anybody join, or is there a restriction on membership, perhaps?
For freshman members, anyone is welcome to join.
Okay.
For returning members, you have to have met a certain score of legislation that our staff of the Texas Conservative Coalition scores at the end of every session to meet certain requirements. And if you meet certain requirements, then you're considered a conservative champion.
Okay.
And then we travel around the state and try to present awards to members and let people know that, hey, you not only made the grade, you're going to continue to be a member, and we just want to celebrate the success. You know, Governor Abbott said last session it was the most conservative session that we've had, and we feel like that's attributed to the leadership in the Senate, the leadership in the House, and the members of the Texas Conservative Coalition.
Okay, so the coalition is a membership type organization with a bit of a threshold that not anybody can join. How about going back to what you were mentioning about the particulars in the Pledge? You've got, I'm sure, budget items, education items, perhaps some environmental items. Talk about maybe education, which is something you've focused on in the past and is on most taxpayers and constituents' minds.
Sure, actually, education is probably one of the biggest issues in the district that I serve in, Blanco and Hayes counties. And there's a few key areas on improving education that we want to see. We want to advance public school choice. So we want to allow parents that are in a school within a public school district to be able to move from one school to another school within that school district. And if the school district refuses, they can move to another independent school district. So that's public school choice and what that means. Allowing parents that may work close to another school district to have their children travel to and from work with them, so it's more convenient for the parents. They have access. They're not further away from their children during the day should an emergency arise. So we want to advance public school choice. We want to support a parent's right to enroll their child in the school of the parent's choice, which is similar to the public school choice. Remove regulatory hurdles to all forms of digital learning. And one of the big
Big and growing issue these days on the education front.
Yes, we're continuing to see digital learning grow just drastically, and there are opportunities where children can get an education online. We're already allowing children in school districts to do this, where their school district may not offer a course to their school. They can take an online course and get credit for it while they're at their school. I think we need to reduce those barriers, let children get educated how their parents see fit best. One of the biggest areas is that we're going to look to pass is education savings accounts. And this has been a very controversial issue throughout the state. The rural school districts are concerned, urban school districts are concerned, the suburban school districts. Everybody has concerns.
I know Lieutenant Governor Patrick's made it one of his priorities.
Yes, this is absolutely one of the Senate and the Lieutenant Governor Patrick's priorities. But an area where I'm not hearing any concern is if we pass education savings account for students that are federally defined as having special needs.
Okay.
There's a great school in Austin called Ross and Saunders, and it treats students with dyslexia. I went over there and toured that facility, and I've met with students. These are students that I knew that because they had been in school with my boys, and I'd coached them in sports. And I said, wow, I haven't seen them in a year. I wonder where they've been. Well, now I know they've been at Ross and Saunders, this great school, where a public school district may spend 1 day a week with a student with dyslexia or an hour a day. Mm-hmm. At Ross and Saunders, a private school that focuses on special needs students with dyslexia, they spend 100% of the day focusing on their children that have this issue, which is a growing issue with dyslexia. But parents don't have the ability. It's only the ones that have the financial means to take their students out of public school and move them over to a private school. So we need to open that up and allow parents to get their tax dollars and move them to a school of the choice that they think is best for their student with special needs.
And that leads to another issue I know you've been focusing on. Folks, I want to thank you again for joining us. We're visiting with State Representative Jason Isaac from House District 45 and the Vice Chairman of the Texas Conservative Coalition. That leads, based upon what's the curriculum and what's taught in the classroom, to testing.
Correct.
And the infamous STAAR test. You've been working on the state assessment of education progress in the classroom. Talk about your efforts and what's the latest outlook for our STAAR test.
So a little bit of background. Before STAAR, there was TAX. And when I first got elected, I talked to teachers, and they said, with TAX, we were spending 27 days a year preparing the students to take a test. And I was shocked. I didn't know it was that much. They said now with STAAR, we spend 46 days a school year preparing students to take a test. That's a quarter of the school year preparing students to take a test when they should be focusing on preparing them for their future.
And a lot of folks won't know that there is a definition of the school year in the Texas Education Code of 248 days or something like that. So you're talking about
I think it's about 180 some odd days is what the definition is. We changed it to minutes last legislative session to give the districts a little bit more flexibility. I'm all for empowering these what we call independent school districts. They don't have a lot of independence. Our school board members are ironically called trustees, but yet we place a little trust with them to manage their district. And so, I'm working on some reform ideas that will allow school districts, again, they're spending 46 days a year on testing, allowing them the ability to source a standardized test that complies. It's a nationally normed standardized test, which would meet the federal requirements, but it would also have to meet state law and meaning no common core. So there are currently, my estimates, there are 9 vendors out there, companies that make standardized tests. They would have to change and adopt their test to comply with state law if they wanted to play in our market. There's 1,043 school districts, so that competition we know is good for the consumer. Right now there's only one consumer, and that's the state of Texas, with a $300 million contract for a testing provider that had just unbelievable failures last year. There are still students that don't know how they did on tests. They were completely lost. Certain students assigned to different school districts. We've got to get rid of that. We need to put the power back in the school districts, put the independent back in independent school districts.
So when you're talking about these vendors, I know a lot of folks are familiar with the Stanford test or the Iowa test. Folks of my generation used to take that. You're talking about individual school districts being able, and when you say a normed test, it's a test that is objective, it's uniform across the state.
Correct. Well, basically, you could take an Iowa test in one state and compare it to another test that's similar in another state, And you could have a comparison. Okay, how are they on reading proficiency? How are they on their math skills? How are they on their writing? That's what it means to be nationally normed. They may be asking different questions. They may be writing different essays, but you're still going to get the same results so that you can say, okay, Texas is doing better than, every other state. But it does give you that ability to a comparison, which our federal government really wants. They want some sort of nationally normed test to be implemented. That's what the Every Student Succeed Act requires.
And you're right, there were some problems on that last testing cycle. One final
Yes.
question. I know it's the holiday season and you've got some Christmas parties to be attending here later in the day, but let me ask you about the 2017 session. A lot of folks don't realize that legislators can pre-file legislation
Yes.
ahead of the beginning of the session, which starts on January 10th. Just give us an idea, what are some of the things that a representative like yourself is doing to get ready for the session?
So for me, we're working on draft legislation. I haven't filed anything yet. I'm going to wait till we get closer to the start of session, maybe right at the start of the session, because
Okay.
for me personally, I like to go around and find members that can build a coalition like the Texas Conservative Coalition, to build this coalition around the legislative ideas that I have. And quite often, a lot of times, I find other members that said, oh, I've already got a bill on that. And I'll be like, great, let's build the coalition around your bill, and let's get it all signed with a whole bunch of joint authors and co-authors, so that you can tell there are a lot of people that support this legislation. And then let's do a press conference. That's what I want to do with some of the education reform ideas that I'll file, is that we work together, put a press conference together where you can show a force. And that's going to let our leadership know in both the House and the Senate and the governor's office that, hey, there are a lot of people that support this idea that represent hundreds of thousands of constituents around the state. So maybe we need to give this a chance and get it a hearing and get it through the legislative process. So that's what I'm working on now. I have several legislative ideas over several areas, but I want to build this broad coalition up so that I'm more successful in passing legislation.
How about, I mentioned in the introduction, you're from Dripping Springs, Hays and Caldwell County.
Hays and Blanco County.
Hays and Blanco County, just south of Austin. Any particular issues to the district, perhaps?
Groundwater is going to continue to be a big area. We worked really hard last session to protect all the groundwater in House District 45. So that is a huge, tremendous win for us. We need to do more. Right now, our groundwater conservation districts are split up based on man-made political boundaries. It's not based on the science. So we really need to look at a broader scale. We do our river authorities based on the river. We don't cut that river in half and say, hey, you get the north side and this district's going to get the south side. It's the same water. And it's the same water underground. And so we really need to look at doing things more based on the science. So I look forward to working with the Texas Water Development Board and the stakeholders and seeing, is there some way that we can put our Water Development Board regions a little bit more involved in the management of and protection of our groundwater.
Well, State Representative Jason Isaac, we appreciate you coming by. Look forward to visiting with you in the future. And folks, remember to tune in for future editions and visit Texas Conservative Coalition's website and Jason Isaac from House District 45. I'm Jim Cardle. Thanks for joining us.